The monitors in the maternity ward beeped in a steady, rhythmic lullaby, the only comforting sound in the sterile room as Naomi cradled her hours-old son. Her husband, David, had stepped into the dimly lit hallway to take what he claimed was an urgent, late-night call from his regional manager. Ignoring the searing pain of her fresh C-section, Naomi shuffled toward the door to ask him for ice chips. But as she cracked the heavy oak door, the words she heard froze the blood in her veins. "I know, Chloe. I'm just playing the part here. You and the kids are my real family. I'll be home to you soon." Naomi Jefferson was not a woman who missed red flags. As a highly sought-after commercial architect in Seattle, her entire career was built on seeing structural weaknesses before the foundation was even poured. She was a striking, dark-skinned black woman with a brilliant mind, a fierce independence, and a laugh that could warm the dampest Pacific Northwest evening. When she met David Richards, she thought she had found a partner whose foundation was as solid as her own. David was a charismatic, blue-eyed corporate litigator. He was the kind of white man who effortlessly navigated any room he walked into, wielding his charm like a master key. They met at a charity gala downtown, and David's pursuit of Naomi had been nothing short of cinematic. He was attentive, endlessly supportive of her demanding career, and completely enamored by her strength. Their wedding in the lush gardens of a historic Savannah estate had been splashed across the social pages of local magazines, a beautiful merging of two successful, driven people. To the outside world, and to Naomi herself, they were the modern aspirational couple. For the first 4 years, the marriage was a fortress, but the cracks began to show when they decided to expand their family. The journey to parenthood was a brutal, grueling marathon. Naomi suffered 3 devastating miscarriages in 2 years. The physical toll on her body was immense, but the psychological weight was crushing. During the first 2 losses, David was her rock, holding her as she wept in the sterile, white rooms of the fertility clinic. But by the 3rd miscarriage, a subtle, chilling shift occurred. David's comforting embraces felt more like obligations. His eyes, once warm and present, began to glaze over with a distant, hollow detachment. When Naomi finally fell pregnant a 4th time, she was terrified. She held her breath through the first trimester, barely daring to whisper the news to her fiercely protective older sister, Maya. When they crossed the 20-week mark and learned they were having a boy, Naomi finally allowed herself to exhale. She began painting the nursery a soft sage green, buying tiny onesies, and dreaming of the future. But as Naomi's belly swelled, David's absence grew. He had recently been promoted to a senior partner position, a role that supposedly required endless travel. "It's the Portland merger, Nay," he would say, hastily packing his leather duffel bag on a Tuesday evening. "It's a nightmare. I hate leaving you like this, especially now, but it's for our future, for the baby." Naomi, exhausted by the relentless nausea and soaring blood pressure of her high-risk pregnancy, accepted his excuses. She wanted to trust her husband. She needed to. She convinced herself that the lingering scent of floral perfume on his coats was just the ambient smell of crowded airplanes or elevator rides with female colleagues. She told herself that his fiercely guarded phone, constantly placed face down on the granite kitchen island, was just a byproduct of confidential corporate lawsuits. She blamed her rising paranoia on pregnancy hormones. During her 3rd trimester, Naomi developed severe preeclampsia. Her blood pressure spiked to dangerous levels, forcing her onto strict bed rest. For 6 weeks, she lay in their sprawling, silent house, staring at the ceiling while David spent 4 days a week in Portland. "I can't just drop a multi-million-dollar litigation, Naomi," he snapped one evening, when she tearfully begged him to stay home for the weekend. It was the first time he had ever raised his voice at her. He instantly softened, kneeling by the sofa and kissing her swollen hands. "I'm sorry. The stress is killing me. I'm doing this for us. I promise, as soon as Leo is born, I'm taking 2 months of paternity leave. It'll just be the 3 of us." Naomi clung to that promise. It became her lifeline as her body swelled and ached. She pushed down the nagging intuition that something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. She was a woman about to bring a life into the world. She simply didn't have the emotional bandwidth to entertain the idea that her marriage was a lie. She focused all her energy, all her love, on the tiny, kicking life inside her. Little Leo was going to be the glue that brought David back to her. But foundations built on sand cannot withstand a storm, and Naomi's storm was about to make landfall. The birth of Leo was not the serene, joyful occasion Naomi had envisioned. At 38 weeks, her blood pressure skyrocketed to a catastrophic 180/110. Her obstetrician, Dr. Sarah Evans, took one look at the monitors and ordered an immediate emergency cesarean section. The ensuing hours were a blur of blinding hospital lights, rushing nurses, and the sharp, terrifying sting of the spinal block. David arrived at Seattle General Hospital just as they were wheeling Naomi into the operating theater. He was dressed in a crisp, bespoke navy suit, looking wildly out of place amidst the frantic medical staff. As he sat by her head, wearing blue scrubs over his suit, Naomi noticed his eyes constantly darting downward. While the surgeons were cutting through Naomi's abdomen to save her life and the life of their son, David was texting under the sterile drape. When the piercing, beautiful cry of her son finally filled the cold room, tears streamed down Naomi's face. They brought the tiny 6-pound boy to her cheek. He was perfect, a beautiful blend of his parents, with a shock of dark, curly hair. Naomi looked up at David, expecting to see the overwhelming joy and relief she felt reflected in his eyes. Instead, he looked panicked. He gave the baby a brief, tight smile, kissed Naomi's forehead and said, "He's great, Nay. You did great. I need to text my mother." By midnight, the hospital had finally quieted down. Naomi was recovering in a private suite in the maternity ward. The exhaustion in her bones was absolute. Her lower half was numb. Her abdomen burned with a dull, throbbing fire, and she was hooked up to IV drips and blood pressure monitors. Baby Leo was swaddled tightly in his plastic bassinet beside her, sleeping peacefully. David was slouched on the uncomfortable vinyl hospital recliner in the corner of the room. He had barely held his son. Every time Naomi asked him to pass the baby, he did so with a stiff, awkward hesitation, as if holding a fragile foreign object. At 1:15 a.m., David's phone vibrated violently against the plastic tray table. He snatched it up with lightning speed. "It's Harrison from the firm," David whispered, looking at the screen with furrowed brows. "There's a massive crisis with the Portland filings. I have to take this in the hall so I don't wake the baby. Try to sleep, Nay." He slipped out the heavy wooden door, pulling it shut behind him. However, the latch didn't fully catch, leaving a sliver of space open to the hallway. 10 minutes passed. Naomi's throat felt like sandpaper. The anesthesia was wearing off, leaving her parched and desperately thirsty. She looked at her bedside table. Her water pitcher was empty. She didn't want to hit the call button and bother the overworked night nurses just for water. Figuring David was right outside, she decided to ask him. Gritting her teeth against the agonizing pull of her freshly stapled incision, Naomi slowly, tortuously pushed herself up from the bed. She gripped the metal railing, dragging her IV pole with her. Every step felt like walking through wet cement. She shuffled toward the door, intending to push it open and wave him down. As she leaned her weight against the doorframe, David's voice drifted through the crack. He wasn't speaking in his sharp, authoritative lawyer tone. He was speaking in a soft, hushed, intimate whisper. "I know it's hard, baby," David was saying. "I know." Naomi froze. "Baby?" Harrison from the firm was a 60-year-old, cigar-smoking cynic. "Chloe, please don't cry," David continued, his voice laced with an urgent desperation Naomi hadn't heard in years. "I told you, it was an emergency surgery. I had to show up. If I wasn't here, it would raise too many questions with her family, and the divorce lawyers would have a field day with my assets." Naomi stopped breathing. The sterile smell of the hospital seemed to vanish, replaced by a sudden, dizzying lack of oxygen. She gripped the cold metal of the IV pole so hard her knuckles turned white. "No, I didn't hold him," David lied, his voice echoing off the linoleum floor of the empty corridor. "It's fine. I'm just playing the part here until she's stable and I can get the paperwork filed cleanly. You know I don't want this. You and the twins are my real family. I love you. Kiss Oliver and Sophie for me. I'll be home to you in Portland on Thursday, just like always." The world tilted on its axis. The humming of the hospital ventilation system turned into a deafening roar in Naomi's ears. Chloe, the twins, Oliver and Sophie, Portland, my real family. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together with a violent, sickening force. Portland wasn't a corporate merger. Portland was a second life, a second family. While Naomi had been suffering through miscarriages, injecting herself with hormones, and lying in terror on bed rest, the man she had vowed to spend her life with had been playing house with another woman. He had children, twins. A wave of pure, unadulterated nausea hit her. She clapped a hand over her mouth to muffle the gag, her abdominal incision screaming in agony as her muscles contracted. She backed away from the door, her vision blurring with hot, stinging tears. He didn't love her. He didn't want their son. He was just playing a part to protect his assets in an impending divorce. She was nothing to him but a legal liability. Naomi stumbled back to the hospital bed, collapsing onto the mattress. She pulled the blankets up to her chin, shaking violently. It wasn't the post-anesthesia chills. It was the sheer shock of a psychological trauma, so deep it felt physical. She looked over at the clear plastic bassinet. Little Leo was making tiny, soft breathing sounds. In that moment, staring at her innocent, fatherless newborn, the weeping, heartbroken wife died, and a terrifyingly calm, fiercely protective mother was born. Panic is a loud, chaotic emotion, but survival, true, primal survival, is silent. Naomi lay completely still as the door creaked open. David stepped back into the room, sliding his phone into his pocket. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair and let out a heavy, theatrical sigh. "Harrison is going to drive me to an early grave," David muttered, walking over to the recliner. He glanced at Naomi, who had her eyes half closed, feigning a drowsy stupor. "Did you need something, Nay? You look pale." "Just pain meds kicking in," Naomi whispered, her voice surprisingly steady despite the violent tremors racking her inside. She couldn't look him in the eyes. If she did, she knew she would scream. She would grab the scalpel from the surgical tray and plunge it into his chest. She had to play the part, just as he was. "I'm going to sleep." "Good idea," David said. He checked his gold Rolex, an anniversary gift she had bought him 2 years ago. "Listen, it's almost 2 a.m. I'm exhausted, and this chair is breaking my back. I'm going to run home, shower, grab a few hours of real sleep in our bed, and bring you some fresh clothes in the morning. Is that okay?" He couldn't even stand to be in the same room as his newborn son for a single night. "That's fine," Naomi murmured. "Go." David leaned down and kissed her forehead. His lips felt like poison against her skin. "Love you. Call me if there's an emergency." He didn't even look at the bassinet as he walked out the door. The second the heavy door clicked shut, Naomi threw the blankets off. The blinding pain in her abdomen was still there, but it was now completely masked by a massive surge of adrenaline. Her mind was working at light speed, calculating variables, assessing risks. David was a powerful, wealthy litigator. If she confronted him, he would gaslight her. He would manipulate the situation. If he was planning a divorce to protect his assets, he might try to take Leo just to spite her, or to lower his child support payments. He had a whole other family. A mistress who clearly knew about Naomi and didn't care. He was a sociopath. She was entirely vulnerable, recovering from major surgery, heavily medicated, and alone. She could not stay here. She could not go back to that house. Naomi grabbed her cell phone from the bedside table and dialed her sister, Maya. Maya was a fiercely protective, no-nonsense defense attorney who lived across town in Capitol Hill. The phone rang twice before Maya answered, her voice thick with sleep. "Nay? Is everything okay? Is Leo all right?" "Maya, listen to me very carefully," Naomi said, her voice a low, urgent hiss. "Do not ask questions. I need you to get in your car right now. Drive to the loading dock entrance at the back of Seattle General. Text me when you are 2 minutes away." "What?" "Naomi, you just had major abdominal surgery." "Maya, if you love me, do exactly what I am telling you. David has another family in Portland. He's planning to blindside me. I am leaving. Now." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line, followed instantly by the rustling of sheets and the jingling of keys. Maya didn't hesitate. "I'm leaving right now. Have your location on." Naomi hung up. She swung her legs over the side of the bed. She methodically removed the blood pressure cuff. She peeled the heart monitor stickers off her chest, ignoring the sticky residue. The IV was trickier. She peeled back the medical tape, clamped the line shut so she wouldn't bleed everywhere, and carefully slid the needle out of her vein, pressing a cotton ball down hard until it clotted. She opened the small closet. David hadn't brought her a change of clothes yet, so she was forced to put on the sweatpants and oversized maternity sweater she had worn to the hospital. Bending over to pull up the pants sent a shockwave of white-hot agony through her core, bringing tears to her eyes. But she bit her lip until it bled, refusing to make a sound. Next, she moved to the bassinet. Leo was still sleeping. Naomi carefully lifted his tiny body, wrapping him securely in 2 thick hospital blankets. She placed him gently in the portable car seat, resting in the corner of the room. She grabbed her purse, making sure her wallet, ID, and keys were inside. Then, she looked at her left hand. The 3-carat diamond engagement ring and the platinum wedding band sparkled mockingly under the harsh fluorescent lights, a symbol of a 5-year lie. Naomi slid the rings off her finger. She walked over to the rolling tray table where David had been sitting and placed them dead center, right next to the empty plastic water pitcher. She walked out into the hallway, carrying the heavy car seat. The night shift was incredibly quiet. She bypassed the main nurse's station, taking the staff service elevators she had noticed earlier that day. Her architectural brain mapped the hospital instinctively. As she reached the ground floor corridor leading to the loading docks, a young night nurse stepped out of a supply closet. The woman looked at Naomi, then down at the car seat, her eyes widening in alarm. "Ma'am, you can't be out of bed. Have you been discharged? I need to check your wristband." Naomi stopped. She stood to her full height, her dark eyes locking onto the young nurse with an intensity that made the woman take a step back. "My name is Naomi Richards," she said, her voice dangerously calm. "I am leaving this hospital against medical advice. I am fully aware of the risks. I will call the administration in the morning to sign the AMA paperwork. If you try to stop me, or if you touch me or my son, I will have you arrested for false imprisonment. Step aside." The nurse, utterly intimidated by the sheer force of Naomi's presence, slowly stepped back against the wall, her mouth slightly open. Naomi pushed open the heavy double doors leading to the loading dock. The frigid, damp Seattle night air hit her like a physical blow, cutting through her sweater. But she didn't shiver. Headlights flashed at the bottom of the ramp. Maya's black SUV idled in the shadows. Naomi walked down the concrete ramp, every step a brutal reminder of the surgery she had just endured, but she kept her head high. Maya threw the passenger door open, leaping out to grab the car seat from Naomi's trembling hands. "Get in! Get in!" Maya urged, her eyes wide with shock and fury as she secured Leo in the back seat. Naomi climbed into the passenger side, pulling the door shut. As Maya slammed the car into drive and sped away from the hospital, Naomi looked out the window. She was bleeding. She was broken, and her entire life had just been incinerated. But as she heard the soft, even breathing of her son from the back seat, she knew one thing for certain. David Richards thought he was the one pulling the strings. He thought he could walk away cleanly. He had no idea the war he had just started. The safe house was not a cabin in the woods, but a sterile, ultra-modern penthouse in downtown Bellevue. It belonged to one of Maya's wealthiest defense clients, a tech executive who was currently spending 6 months in Dubai. It was a fortress of glass and steel, accessible only by a private elevator with biometric security, completely off the grid of David's sprawling Seattle network. When Maya practically carried Naomi through the heavy mahogany doors, the adrenaline that had fueled Naomi's escape suddenly evaporated, leaving behind a husk of pure, blinding agony. The 30-minute drive from the hospital had jostled her fresh surgical wounds, and her grey sweatpants were stained with a terrifying, blooming patch of crimson. "I need a doctor, Maya," Naomi gasped, collapsing onto the imported Italian leather sofa, clutching Leo's car seat to her chest. "But not a hospital. He'll track the insurance. He'll track my name." Maya was already dialing. "I'm calling Gregory. He owes me his medical license after that malpractice suit I made disappear last year. He'll keep his mouth shut." Dr. Gregory Hayes arrived less than 40 minutes later, carrying a heavy black medical bag and an expression of grim professionalism. He asked no questions as he administered a local anesthetic, restapled the section of Naomi's incision that had torn open during her flight, and hooked her up to an IV cocktail of antibiotics and heavy painkillers. He checked Leo's vitals, pronouncing the newborn perfectly healthy, before leaving behind 2 weeks' worth of medical supplies and a burner phone. By sunrise, the rain had stopped, casting a pale, grey morning light over the Seattle skyline. Naomi was propped up in the master bedroom, Leo sleeping soundly on her chest. The physical pain was dulled by the medication, but her mind was terrifyingly sharp. She was an architect. Her entire life was dedicated to understanding how structures held together, and more importantly, how to tear them apart. Across the Puget Sound, at 7:15 a.m., David Richards walked into room 412 of the Seattle General Maternity Ward, carrying a bouquet of pink peonies and a designer overnight bag. He found the bed stripped. The heart monitors were turned off, and sitting perfectly centered on the rolling plastic tray table, illuminated by the harsh fluorescent lights, were the 3-carat diamond engagement ring and the platinum wedding band he had placed on Naomi's finger 5 years ago. For a moment, David stood frozen, the peonies slipping from his grasp and scattering across the linoleum floor. He didn't feel the sharp, breathless panic of a husband, terrified for his wife's safety. He felt the cold, sickening dread of a man whose carefully constructed web had just caught fire. He grabbed his phone and called his mentor, Richard Sterling, the managing partner of his law firm. "Richard, it's David." "I have a catastrophic situation," David said, his voice dropping to a panicked whisper as he paced the empty hospital room. "Naomi is gone. She took the baby." "What do you mean? Gone?" "She just had a C-section." Richard's gravelly voice barked through the receiver. "She checked out against medical advice. Left her rings. Richard, she heard me on the phone last night. She heard me talking to Chloe." There was a heavy, condemning silence on the other end of the line. "You arrogant fool," Richard finally hissed. "I told you to sever the Portland tie before the child was born. If she files for divorce in King County and brings your double life into the light, she will take half of everything. Your equity in the firm, the Mercer Island house, your investment portfolios. She'll ruin you socially and professionally." "I know," David snapped, running a trembling hand through his hair. "What's the play?" "We control the narrative before she does," Richard instructed coldly. "She is a high-risk postpartum mother who just underwent major surgery. She absconded with a newborn in the middle of the night without medical clearance. You are the terrified, devoted husband. Call the police. File a missing persons report. Tell them she's been exhibiting severe signs of postpartum psychosis. We paint her as mentally unstable, get an emergency ex parte custody order, and freeze her bank accounts so she can't retain a shark of a lawyer." David nodded, a cruel, desperate relief washing over him. "Postpartum psychosis. Right. She's a danger to herself and my son." He ended the call and dialed 911, forcing his voice to break into a manufactured, hysterical sob. Back in the Bellevue penthouse, Maya was sitting at the glass dining table, surrounded by 3 glowing laptops. She had spent the last 4 hours legally maneuvering through Naomi and David's joint finances. "He's moving fast, Nay," Maya called out, walking into the bedroom with a mug of herbal tea. "My contacts at the King County Courthouse just flagged an emergency filing. David is petitioning for full temporary custody of Leo and a psychological evaluation for you. He filed a police report claiming you had a psychotic break and kidnapped his son." Naomi didn't flinch. She stroked Leo's soft, dark hair, her eyes hardening into obsidian. "Of course he did," Naomi said, her voice completely devoid of emotion. "He's a litigator. If the facts are against you, you attack the witness. He wants to drag me out into the light, paint me as a crazy, hysterical black woman, and take my child." "I've already contacted the Seattle PD detective assigned to the case," Maya said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I informed them that I am your legal counsel, that you are of sound mind, recovering in a secure location under private medical care, and that you fled due to severe emotional abuse. The police won't touch you now. They know it's a civil family court matter. But David's firm has already frozen the joint checking and savings accounts." Naomi looked up at her sister. "How much did he take?" "Everything in the liquid accounts," Maya said grimly. "About $400,000. But nay, that's not the worst part. I've been digging into his wire transfers. For the last 3 years, he's been funneling his annual bonuses into a blind trust called Pacific Horizon Holdings." Naomi's breath hitched. 3 years. The betrayal was older than she thought. "Maya," Naomi said softly, "find everything. I don't care what it costs. Hire the best private investigator on the West Coast. I want to know the name of his mistress The names of those children, what he bought them, and exactly how long he's been lying to my face. I am not going to just defend myself against his custody petition. I am going to obliterate him. 48 hours later, a man named Benjamin Cole stepped off the private elevator into the Bellevue penthouse. Benjamin was a former FBI forensic accountant who had traded his government badge for a lucrative career as the most ruthless private investigator in the Pacific Northwest. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a quiet demeanor that belied his terrifying efficiency. He laid a thick manila folder on the glass dining table. Naomi, moving slowly and wincing with every step, sat down opposite him. Maya stood behind her sister, arms crossed protectively. "You were right to call me, counselor," Benjamin addressed Maya before turning his piercing gaze to Naomi. "Mrs. Richards, your husband is a very sloppy man, masquerading as a clever one. Let's start with the mistress." He opened the folder and slid a high-resolution photograph across the table. It showed a petite, blonde white woman loading groceries into a white Range Rover. "Her name is Chloe Hastings," Benjamin stated. 32 years old, former paralegal at David's previous firm in San Francisco. She relocated to Portland 4 years ago. She currently runs a boutique floral shop, fully funded by Pacific Horizon Holdings. Naomi stared at the woman's face. She looked so ordinary, so wildly mundane. Benjamin slid 2 more photos onto the table. They were taken at a public park. David was pushing 2 toddlers, a boy and a girl with striking blonde hair, on a set of swings. He was laughing, his face lit up with a genuine, unburdened joy that Naomi hadn't seen directed at her in years. "These are the twins, Oliver and Sophie," Benjamin said softly. "They turned 3 years old last month." The air in the room vanished. Naomi gripped the edge of the glass table so hard her hands shook. 3 years old. Naomi closed her eyes as the timeline hit her like a physical blow to the chest. To have 3-year-old twins, Chloe had to have gotten pregnant nearly 4 years ago. That was exactly when Naomi had suffered her very first miscarriage. While she had been bleeding, crying on the bathroom floor, begging God for answers, her husband had been getting another woman pregnant. While he was holding Naomi's hand in the fertility clinic, playing the tragic, supportive husband, he was picking out baby names with his paralegal. "He's been with her since our first year of marriage," Naomi whispered, a single tear escaping her eye before she furiously wiped it away. The profound cruelty of it was almost incomprehensible. He had watched her endure 3 miscarriages, high-risk bed rest, and daily hormone injections, knowing he already had the healthy children he wanted, waiting for him 200 miles away. "It gets worse," Benjamin said, his tone turning dangerously professional. "We looked into the property records for the house in Portland. It's a custom-built $2.5 million estate in the West Hills. Chloe Hastings is listed as the primary resident, but the deed is held by Pacific Horizon Holdings." Maya leaned forward, her attorney instincts flaring. If he used marital funds from his bonuses to buy that house, Naomi is entitled to 50% of its value in the divorce. "He didn't use his bonuses to buy it," Benjamin corrected, sliding a heavily redacted banking document across the table. David's bonuses were used to cover Chloe's living expenses and the floral shop. To buy the Portland estate in cash, David took out a massive home equity line of credit. Naomi frowned, her architectural mind engaging. "A haylock? Against our Mercer Island house? He couldn't do that without my signature. I never signed anything." "He didn't take it out against the Mercer Island house," Benjamin said, looking directly at Naomi. "He took it out against the commercial property downtown, the building that houses your architectural firm. He used your business as collateral." Maya let out a sharp, shocked breath. "That's impossible." Naomi is the sole owner of the LLC that owns that commercial building. David has no legal standing to leverage it. He does if he forged her signature on the loan documents and used a notary at his law firm to rubber stamp it, Benjamin replied grimly. I pulled the original loan application from the bank. The signature belongs to Naomi Richards, but it's a blatant forgery. He effectively stole $2.5 million in equity from your life's work to buy a mansion for his mistress. Silence descended on the penthouse, thick and suffocating. David hadn't just cheated. He hadn't just lied. He had actively committed federal bank fraud, wire fraud, and felony forgery, using Naomi's hard-earned professional legacy as his personal ATM. If Naomi's architectural firm hit a financial rough patch and couldn't cover the mortgage, the bank would foreclose, and Naomi would lose her entire company. David had rigged her foundation with explosives, ready to detonate the second he decided to walk away. Maya was vibrating with a terrifying, righteous rage. I'll kill him. I'll actually kill him. I'm going to call the DA right now. This isn't family court anymore. This is a federal crime. We can have him arrested by midnight. No, Naomi said. Her voice was quiet, but it commanded the room with the force of a gavel strike. She slowly looked up from the forged bank documents. The devastation and heartbreak that had clouded her eyes for the last 48 hours were gone. In their place was a cold, calculating brilliance. Naomi, he committed a felony against you, Maya argued. If we drop this on the judge tomorrow at the emergency custody hearing, David loses everything. He goes to prison. If we arrest him now, his firm's crisis management team spins it, Naomi said, her voice deadly calm. They'll say it was a misunderstanding, a marital loan, that he intended to pay it back. He'll post bail. He'll drag the divorce out for years. He'll use the twins as a sympathy card. No, I don't want him to just go to prison, Maya. I want him to lose everything he loves first, exactly the way he tried to do to me. She looked at Benjamin Cole. Mr. Cole, does Chloe Hastings know that David is legally married to me? Based on her social media footprint and intercepted emails, yes, Benjamin confirmed. She refers to him as her fiancé, but she frequently complains to her friends about his crazy, estranged wife, who refuses to sign the divorce papers. He's been telling her for 3 years that you and he are separated and fighting over assets. Naomi nodded slowly. A blueprint was forming in her mind, a masterclass in destruction. David thrives on control, Naomi said, looking back at her sister. He thinks he has me backed into a corner with this emergency custody hearing. He thinks I'm going to show up tomorrow, weeping, hysterical, trying to defend my sanity. He thinks he's playing chess while I'm playing checkers. Naomi carefully stood up, ignoring the burning sting in her abdomen. She walked over to the bassinet, where little Leo was sleeping, gently resting her hand on his chest. Maya, draft my response to his custody petition, Naomi instructed, her tone pure ice. Do not mention the forgery. Do not mention Chloe. I will submit to his psychological evaluation. I will agree to supervised visitation for him. We are going to play the role of the terrified, compliant, broken wife. We are going to let him think he won the first round. Maya frowned, confused. Why are we giving him an inch? Because, Naomi said, turning her dark, unyielding gaze toward the Seattle skyline, a structural collapse is always more devastating when the architect lets you build the skyscraper to the very top floor before kicking out the main support beam. Let him think he's safe, and while he's looking the other way, I'm going to take Portland. The King County Courthouse was a towering monolith of gray stone and glass, a place where lives were routinely fractured and divided. On a rainy Thursday morning, 4 days after she had fled the hospital, Naomi Richards was wheeled through the heavy oak doors of courtroom 4B. She looked the exact part David's legal team had written for her. Dressed in an oversized, muted grey cardigan, her face devoid of makeup, Naomi stared blankly at her hands resting in her lap. The wheelchair, insisted upon by Dr. Hayes due to the risk of her fresh C-section tearing, completed the image of a fragile, broken woman teetering on the edge of sanity. Across the aisle, David sat at the petitioner's table, flanked by Thomas Kessler, a high-priced, ruthlessly aggressive family law attorney. David was wearing his signature charcoal Tom Ford suit. He looked perfectly composed, radiating the aura of a deeply concerned, heartbroken father. When Naomi was wheeled in, he offered her a look of pity, so rehearsed it made her stomach turn. Judge Harrison, a stern, white-haired man who had presided over family court for 2 decades, called the emergency hearing to order. "Your Honor," Kessler began, standing and buttoning his suit jacket, "we are here because my client's wife has suffered a severe, tragic psychological break. 4 days ago, hours after a traumatic emergency C-section, Mrs. Richards absconded from Seattle General Hospital with their newborn son. She disconnected her medical equipment, left her wedding rings on a tray, and vanished into the night. We are petitioning for an emergency order, granting Mr. Richards full temporary custody and mandating an immediate inpatient psychiatric evaluation for the respondent." Judge Harrison looked down at Naomi with a mixture of concern and legal skepticism. He turned to Maya, who was standing at the respondent's table. "Counselor, does your client have a defense for endangering a newborn and fleeing a medical facility?" Naomi dug her fingernails into her palms, keeping her eyes glued to the floor. "Play the part," she reminded herself. "Let him build the tower." "Your Honor," Maya said, her voice intentionally subdued, lacking her usual courtroom fire. "My client underwent a massive physical trauma. Her blood pressure was critical. She was disoriented from the anesthesia and heavy narcotics. She didn't flee maliciously. She had a panic attack and called me, her sister, to take her to a private, secure location where she has been under the 24-hour care of a licensed physician. Baby Leo is perfectly healthy. That doesn't negate the erratic, dangerous behavior, Your Honor," Kessler interjected smoothly. "Mr. Richards is terrified for his son. We demand the child be turned over to his father immediately." Maya looked at Naomi, pretending to have a whispered, frantic consultation. Naomi gave a slow, defeated nod. "Your Honor," Maya said, sounding resigned. "Given my client's physical recovery, she concedes that she cannot care for the infant alone at this moment. However, she is terrified of being separated from him. We propose a compromise. Temporary physical custody is granted to me, the maternal aunt. Mr. Richards may have unlimited, supervised visitation at my home. Mrs. Richards will submit to the psychiatric evaluation and an outpatient recovery program." David's eyes flared with a triumphant gleam. He leaned over and whispered to Kessler. Kessler nodded. "We accept the compromise, Your Honor," Kessler said, "as long as my client has immediate access to his son and Mrs. Richards's finances remain frozen to prevent another flight risk." "Agreed," Judge Harrison said, slamming his gavel. Order entered. But Maya wasn't finished. "One final matter of housekeeping, Your Honor. Since the marital assets are currently frozen per the petitioner's request, I just need to officially enter Mr. Richards's sworn statement of net worth and asset disclosure into the court record to ensure my client's medical bills can be properly allocated." Maya slid a thick stack of papers across the table. It was the standard financial disclosure form David had filled out the day prior. Kessler waved his hand dismissively. "Standard procedure, Your Honor. The petitioner's assets are fully disclosed." "Mr. Richards," Maya said, looking directly at David for the first time, "you are under oath. Do you swear that this document represents the entirety of your financial assets, properties, and trusts?" David smiled, a slick, practiced expression. He had hidden Pacific Horizon Holdings behind 3 shell companies and a registered agent in Delaware. He was certain it was untraceable. "I do," David stated clearly for the court reporter. "Thank you," Maya said quietly. She turned and walked back to Naomi's wheelchair. As Maya gripped the handles to wheel her sister out, Naomi finally looked up and met David's eyes. She didn't look broken anymore. For a fraction of a second, the mask slipped, and David saw something terrifyingly cold and sharp in his wife's gaze. But then the courtroom door swung shut, and David brushed it off. He had won. He had secured his son, frozen her money, and painted her as unstable. He pulled out his phone and texted Chloe. The crazy ex caved. The judge bought it all. Seattle is handled. Coming home to you and the twins tomorrow night. He had no idea that by saying, "I do," in that courtroom, he hadn't just lied to his wife. He had committed felony perjury in front of a King County judge, officially locking his federal bank fraud into the public record. The structural beams were cut. It was time to push the building over. 2 days later, the rain cleared in Portland, Oregon, giving way to a crisp, bright Saturday morning. The Pearl District was bustling with weekend shoppers. Nestled between a high-end artisan bakery and a boutique art gallery was the Gilded Lily, Chloe Hastings' lavish floral shop. The bell above the glass door chimed as Naomi walked in. She was no longer the woman in the wheelchair, dressed in a sharply tailored camel trench coat, her hair immaculately styled. She walked with the slow, commanding grace of a woman who owned the room. Benjamin Cole, the towering private investigator, stepped in behind her, flipping the sign on the door to "closed" and locking the deadbolt. Chloe, a petite blonde woman wearing a designer linen apron, looked up from a sprawling arrangement of white hydrangeas. Her smile faltered when she saw the locked door, and then vanished completely when she recognized Naomi from the photos David had shown her. "You," Chloe gasped, taking a step back, her hand instinctively reaching for her phone on the counter. "What are you doing here? David warned me you were unstable. If you don't leave right now, I am calling the police." "Put the phone down, Chloe," Naomi said. Her voice wasn't angry. It was chillingly calm, carrying the authoritative weight of an executive in a boardroom. "If you call the police, you will be leaving this shop in handcuffs, and your twins will be placed in emergency foster care." Chloe froze, her fingers hovering over the screen. "You're crazy. David told me you refused to sign the divorce papers. He told me you were trying to steal his money." Naomi walked over to the marble counter. She reached into her designer tote bag and pulled out a thick, leather-bound portfolio. She opened it and laid the first document on the counter. "This is a certified copy of my marriage license to David Richards," Naomi said smoothly. "Next to it are our joint tax returns from the last 3 years. We are not separated, Chloe. We have never been separated. We were actively trying for a baby the entire time he was sleeping in your bed." Chloe stared at the documents, her blue eyes widening in horror as the dates registered in her mind. No, that's impossible. He said he moved out of your house 3 years ago." "He lied to you, just like he lied to me," Naomi said, leaning slightly over the counter. "But the romantic betrayal is the least of your problems. Look at the next document." Naomi slid a heavy, multi-page bank contract across the marble. It was the home equity line of credit. "Do you recognize the name of the holding company that pays the lease on this floral shop and holds the deed to your $2.5 million house in the West Hills?" Naomi asked. "Pacific Horizon Holdings," Chloe whispered, her voice trembling. "David's trust." "It's not a trust," Benjamin Cole spoke up, his deep voice rattling the glass vases. "It's a shell company used to launder stolen money." Naomi tapped the signature line on the loan document. "David forged my signature to take a $2.5 million loan against my commercial architectural firm. He used my life's work to buy your house. That is felony bank fraud, wire fraud, and forgery. And because your name is on the lease of this shop, and you are the primary resident of that house, the FBI will view you as a co-conspirator." All the color drained from Chloe's face. The expensive linen apron suddenly looked like a straitjacket. She sank onto a wooden stool behind the counter, burying her face in her hands. A ragged, hyperventilating sob tore from her throat. "I didn't know," Chloe wept, her entire body shaking. "I swear to God I didn't know. He told me it was his bonus money. He told me he was protecting his assets from you. I have 2 babies. You can't let them take my babies." Naomi looked at the weeping woman. A part of her wanted to feel rage, but she only felt a cold, sterile pity. Chloe wasn't the mastermind. She was just another piece of collateral damage in David's narcissistic universe. "I don't want your children, Chloe," Naomi said quietly. "But I want my life back, and I want the man who tried to destroy it to burn." "David is driving down here tonight for his weekend visit, isn't he?" Chloe nodded frantically, tears streaming down her face. "Good," Naomi said, closing the leather portfolio. "Here is what is going to happen. You are going to go to the house in the West Hills. You are going to pack your bags, and you are going to take your children to your mother's house in San Francisco, because by midnight tonight, the FBI is seizing that property as evidence of federal bank fraud." "And David?" Chloe whispered. Naomi's lips curled into a razor-thin smile. "David is mine." At 8:30 p.m., the rain returned to Portland, slicking the winding, forested roads of the West Hills. David Richards pulled his pristine Range Rover into the sweeping circular driveway of the massive, custom-built estate. He let out a long, exhausted sigh. The week had been agonizing, but he had pulled it off. Naomi was neutralized, his firm was safe, and now he could finally relax in his true home. He unlocked the heavy mahogany front door and stepped into the sprawling, dimly lit foyer. "Chloe, I'm home, baby," David called out, shrugging off his wet coat. Silence answered him. He frowned, walking past the floating glass staircase into the massive, open-concept living room. The fire was unlit. The toys that usually littered the Persian rug were gone. Sitting in a leather armchair at the far end of the room, illuminated by a single modern floor lamp, was Naomi. David stopped dead in his tracks. His heart slammed against his ribs with the force of a battering ram. "Naomi? How? What are you doing here? How did you find this place?" Naomi slowly crossed her legs. "I'm an architect, David. I know how to read blueprints, and I know how to spot a weak foundation." David's lawyer instincts kicked in. His panic morphed into a terrifying, cornered rage. "You broke into my property. You are violating the court's order. I'm calling the police right now, and I'm having you committed." "This isn't your property, David," Naomi replied, her voice echoing in the empty, cavernous room. "It belongs to the bank, specifically the bank you defrauded when you forged my signature on a $2.5 million HELOC against my commercial firm." The phone slipped from David's trembling hand, clattering loudly against the hardwood floor. The blood rushed from his head, leaving him dizzy, nauseous, and entirely stripped of his power. He opened his mouth to speak, to spin a lie, to manipulate his way out, But no words came. "Chloe is gone," Naomi continued relentlessly. "She took the twins to California. She's cooperating fully with the authorities to avoid being charged as an accessory to your federal crimes." Naomi, please," David stammered, raising his hands, his pristine, arrogant facade crumbling into dust. He fell to his knees on the Persian rug. "I can explain. I can fix this. I'll give you everything. I'll sign over the equity. I'll drop the custody petition. Please don't do this. I'm a senior partner. I'll lose my license. I'll go to prison." "I know," Naomi said simply. Suddenly, the blinding flash of red and blue lights illuminated the massive floor-to-ceiling windows of the living room, painting David's terrified face in alternating colors. The heavy thud of car doors slamming echoed up the driveway. "You thought I was just a woman you could walk away from," Naomi said, standing up and looking down at the pathetic, kneeling man who had once been her husband. "You forgot who built your life, David, and you forgot that the person who builds the house knows exactly which walls to tear down to make the roof cave in." The front door was kicked open. 2 federal agents, accompanied by local Portland police, swarmed the foyer. "David Richards," a stern-faced FBI agent barked, stepping into the living room with handcuffs drawn. "You are under arrest for federal wire fraud, bank fraud, and felony forgery." As the agents hauled a weeping, protesting David to his feet and read him his Miranda rights, Naomi walked past them. She didn't look back. She stepped out into the cool, rainy Oregon night, the flashing lights casting a victorious glow over her path. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was Maya. "Leo just fell asleep." "He's safe. Are you okay?" Naomi smiled, stepping into the waiting black SUV driven by Benjamin Cole. "I'm perfect," she texted back. "I'm coming home." Naomi's story is a chilling reminder that the deepest betrayals often come from the people we trust the most. David thought he could use his legal brilliance and sheer arrogance to manipulate 2 women, hide a secret family, and steal millions, all while playing the victim. But he gravely underestimated the quiet, calculating strength of a mother protecting her child and her legacy. Naomi didn't just survive the storm he put her through. She became the architect of his absolute ruin, proving that while lying might give you a temporary advantage, the truth will eventually tear your house down. If Naomi's brilliant revenge left you speechless, hit that like button. Share this story with someone who loves a masterful twist, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more incredible true-life dramas. Let us know in the comments below. What would you have done if you were in Naomi's shoes?